Is it possible to go to Rachel's house?
Yes,
Because I want that
absolutely.
story to be told if you don't know this story. And when I saw this, it's a difficult image to see. But then when I saw it, as you can see, it says Rachel's house. I realized that I actually was on a JNF USA mission. Some of you were on a JNF USA mission as well this year. And many of those missions stood outside that house. Maybe you tell us the story of Rachel and why it's important to see this image tonight.
So I've mentioned Dana Arieli. So this is one of her works that are included in this project. So Dana was wandering around at Ofakim and some of the adjacent cities, adjacent towns, with a local filmmaker who has been creating a documentary about Ofakim and everything that has been happening there since October 7.
I'm going to pause for 1 second for those who don't know where Ofakim is, because I didn't know where it was until I went there. And it was shocking to see how far the terrorists got into Israel. This was not necessarily a border town, which is right there. It's a small city that's pretty far in. So just want to put that context out there as well.
It's a small city, and it's a small city that in local Israeli imagination is usually associated with marginalized communities. The economic conditions there are much more challenging, meaning the terrorists hurt people that were already struggling in a very, very significant way. And you may have heard about Rachel Edry because she's now preserved in the national Israeli memory as Rachel with the cookies. You may have heard about, they now have murals of her faces all across Ofakim because she was able to deter the terrorists and keep herself and her husband safe by talking to the terrorists and by offering them cookies and food. An amazing woman. And there are stories about how, there were already the police and the military were already outside the house, and they were figuring out how they can enter and save them. So she would walk to her window and she would mark with her hand how many people are. She would signal to the soldiers that were waiting and the police officers that were waiting outside to save them. And because of that, she was able to get out of there alive. So with Dana, as you mentioned, it's not very easy to gain access to that house. As you can see, the house is empty. They can't live there. They were evacuated. She and her husband, an elderly couple, were evacuated from their home, and they still can't go back there. And with this image, we see exactly what you're talking about. We see that transition between inside and outside, with the breeze coming through the window, with the curtains kind of calmly moving above from the stain on the floor. So I should note that all the terrorists were shot dead in that scene. So she and her husband were safe.
The Nova exhibition is just miles away from here, and we've been all asked to go. Some of you have gone. Some of you have asked other people who are not Jewish to go. What does this exhibition mean about telling the story as we're coming up in October 7th, not just from photos from a phone, which go viral on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, X, whatever it is, but in real historical photography? Where does this go beyond this chapel, and what is, in your, not dream world, but ideal world, where does this go, and what lessons can be brought?
What really bothered me about the conversation around October 7th, beyond our community, what really bothered me since the morning of October 7th was how the conversation around it was one-dimensional. You're either on that side or on this side. You're either with them or with them, and you have to pledge allegiance in one particular way. And if you don't do that, then you're out of the conversation at all. And that is opposed, everything that is against the way of life in Israel, and that is completely foreign to the complexity of life and the multi-layered existence in the region. Everybody here that went to Israel just once knows exactly what I'm talking about. It's nuanced and it's complicated and it's difficult and it's joyous and it's wonderful and it's home and it can never be home for many people, and it's all of those things at once. And what photography allows us to do is to look at all of those different layers of existence. Photography can bear witness, and photography can tell a story through a specific perspective. It can do all of those things at once, much like our reality can do all of those things at once. So if there's one thing that I hope you'll take with you from this exhibition, is to remember not just the pain and the devastation, but also the hope, also the potential of working and living together, also the connections between people, because it is only through connections between people that talk to one another that that region could sustain itself and rehabilitate itself for, a better future.
And so some of the photos that we've seen are sort of, I would say, real still life, but there are some that seem to be abstract, and would love you to take us through them. Maybe the one with yeah, exactly, that one. Exactly. I've been staring at this all week and not necessarily understanding and waiting to say, what are we looking at?
So if you've been staring at them all week, then my work here is done. I can drop the mic and leave. Thank you so much. It was a great night. The blocks that you're seeing here, and we were talking a little bit about that outside as well. It's really, as you say, it's kind of hard to tell what you're looking at, and it feels very abstract and it's confusing, which is great because photography can do that as well. Hadar Saifan noticed about 10 years ago that the landscape in Sderot, which is another city in the southern tip of Israel that had transformed in many ways because of ongoing attacks from the south. Sderot has been under bombardments of rockets since in the past 2 decades. And Hadar noticed that the architectural landscape around the area is also changing because people needed bomb shelters and people needed safe spaces and people needed more support in public spaces so that they can keep their safety. So what she did is aerial shots of these structures, and then you can see how she multiplies them and repeats them until they become abstract shapes where you're not even sure what you're looking at. And it's a way to keep track of the changes that are happening in the landscape, but also to think about how strange they are. Their colors, their shapes, the way they're suddenly erected in the landscape, the way they change our perspective on our own lives, that is also really strange. So there's something in the plurality of these shapes that kind of speaks to the strangeness of the experience of life there. And this is one of multiple images, and here we're showing them as a triptych. So we have red, blue, and beige. Almost got red, white, and blue. We almost did it. Oh, it was close.
And just for, again, context, Sderot over the many years was where politicians would go from the United States to sort of see the rockets flying from Gaza. On October 7th, the Sderot police station was one of the first things attacked. That has now become, if you wish, tourism in terms of groups going there and seeing that as well. Maybe take us to the other abstract piece that looks abstract, but is this home? Yeah, exactly. What are we looking at, and how does that art tell a story as well?
So this is a work by Miki Kratzman. Those of you who are familiar with Israeli photojournalism may have come across his name because he's really one of the most renowned photographers working in Israel today. And Miki is usually more associated with work around human rights through photography. So his camera bears witness to things that are usually looked away from. He is really well known for his work around the Bedouin communities in Israel. But this is a really personal work, and it's interesting to me that when the work becomes really, really personal for him, what he's creating is actually a very abstract image. And if you can see the title, it says in Aunt Ophelia's neighborhood. So this is where his aunt was living, and the house was completely demolished. And sadly, she's no longer with us.
You know where it is? Which area? Or not sure?
So this is in one of the kibbutzim around the Western Negev area. And it's a really, really personal piece, and it's heartbreaking. And you're right, it looks completely abstract. When you look at it, you're not sure what you're looking at. And, you know, I could have told you that this is like an avant-garde photograph from the 1920s in Germany, and you would say, yes, you're a photo historian, it's probably right. But it's a very, very personal depiction of complete devastation.
And so I want to ask two more questions, then open up to a conversation. The first is, what is your, I don't like using the word favorite, but most moving photo for you in this exhibition, if you do have one? And I also want to say Donna Ariely will be doing a Zoom program with us, hopefully in January, to go in more in depth in her own photography as well. She couldn't. We're trying to get here for this evening, but we're going to try to do in January to take in depth, or it can be more than one.
Thank you. Yeah, it's very hard to ask the curator or something like that. You know, I've spoken about the plurality of perspectives, and I actually can't think about them as isolated images. For me, they're all a part of this larger story that we're trying to tell. There are works that resonate with me on a personal level. You know, the way my eyes wander onto images. Miki's work is definitely one of those works. I think that for me, all the pieces that play on the abstract possibilities of reality, the meeting point between how we experience life, but the ability to show them as like an abstract creation where you're not sure what you're looking at. I find that really interesting because I think it speaks a lot to the perspective of life in Israel, which is always strange.
Yeah. My last question is not sort of what's next, but this is the album of the South. Yes. And obviously, as we had the news yesterday it's crazy. Like yesterday, I was listening to a podcast, two different podcasts that I listen to regularly, and we're like, well, what's Nasrallah going to do next? And they were also saying, by the time you're listening to this might be old news. And so, which we know is the case. So do you see in the year ahead an album of the North? Because that's a piece that's not spoken about, all the destroyed communities there, hundreds of thousands of people displaced. Is that going to be next?
I've mentioned to you that Dana Ariely is a powerhouse. Mm-hmm. She is already posting the album of the North, and she has been doing it for weeks now. Because it was obvious, you know, everybody in Israel were on edge for the past couple of months, just waiting for the attack to come from the north, not to mention all the rockets and all the bombardments that were already happening in the north, right? It's nothing new. It was already happening as it is. So Dana is now creating the album of the North. Yes. And hopefully she'll stop after that, and there won't be like an album of the center or something.
No, God forbid.
Dana, enough. No. But yeah, it's already happening, and I'm sure it'll have more resonance as well.
And then what would you say is our role as non-professional photographers, but we do have the phone, as Rabbi Guzik and I have been to Israel, Rabbi Taff has been to Israel this year. We did use the power of the phone to just at least document what we were seeing in real time. When Rabbi Guzik went, it was wearing the helmets and the bulletproof gear. When I went in May, it was like a little different. When Rabbi Taff went, it was just days after, and bringing the supplies that we packed here to the IDF soldiers. Do we have a role as amateurs to add to this type of album?
100%. This album already includes works by many amateur photographers. Bear witness. Bear witness. You know, I've mentioned this already. Photography can bear witness. Photography can tell a story through a very specific perspective. All of this is valid. Your perspective matters. Your voice matters. And what I personally love about photography is that it can empower each and every one of us to take ownership over our visual story and share it with the world. You've been given this tool. It's one of the most powerful tools. It's how you win the PR war, right? It's how Israel got beat in the PR war right after October 7. So let's flip the narrative as long as we can, document and share.
So I want to make sure everybody knows, and those who were in the gallery do know, that these are for sale. No proceeds are going to Sinai Temple at all. Every single penny goes to the photographers that you see here to support them. Somebody was asking about how we find out about pricing. Is that online anywhere? And also people who are watching online, I want them to know as well.
Absolutely. So there's also a sign in the gallery with an email address, and I believe we might also have the email address on the webpage of a team member here in Sinai that can provide information about the prices and also connect you directly with the artists. Again, because no one is taking any proceeds from the sales, we just want to connect you directly to the artists so that we can help support them in that way as well.
That's beautiful.